Hello, everybody, and welcome to Guildmaster Gaming. Today, I am talking with screenwriter Kristen Semedo, and she has got one that we've taken a look at called Deadlock, which is going to be I guess, we'll talk more about where it's ranked in FilmQuest, and that's how we ended up getting this together. So, Kristen, please tell us about yourself and tell us about your screenplay.
My name's Kristen Semedo. I'm an LA-based writer and director. I almost exclusively write horror, so this is kind of the niche I live in. But Deadlock was written. I was a ghost tour guide in Salem for 3 years, Salem, Massachusetts, not Portland. But the way that I describe this to people is everyone I know, especially women, has that like one story where they think back on it and they're like, oh, I should have died. And so Deadlock kind of comes from it. It is a ghost story, but it's also not really. It was directly inspired by some real events that happened about 10 years ago. Yeah. I think most writers draw from obviously lots of personal stuff, but yeah, I'm
So, you've already answered my first question I usually ask people. It's what inspired the story? Uh,
yeah,
But what you're
yeah.
saying here is what you did is you took some personal history of what happened, and then
hmm
using the horror backdrop, which is actually part of your background there too, to share a social issue with a horror setting.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. I've actually written an essay that's been published about write what you know, and it's right along those lines of how
Yeah.
we're dangerous writers because we write what we know, and what we know is our society.
And it's a very fine line because you also don't want to be the writer that's just telling your biography like through fiction in like a way that feels like too romanticized.
Uh-huh.
But for Deadlock was definitely I had a very strange man on my tour. I was a broke 20-year-old working three jobs trying to pay rent, and he offered me money to stay behind and stay in the building a bit longer after the tour. And I kind of got pretty bad vibes while I was down there, and I got out alive, obviously, but I rethink about that story quite a bit.
And that's
um,
actually a very good synopsis of what the screenplay is about. So
yeah.
that kind of leads me to the question. So you talked about yourself in that story and him in the story. Was your boss like Maggie
So Maureen,
or
yeah.
Maureen?
And
Sorry,
that's
that
actually that. No, it's okay. That was her real name too. Pretty much everything about her is like dead on except for the off there's a like an offbeat southern drawl to her in this script. This was in Salem, Massachusetts, so if anything she had more of a Bostonian accent, but I just kind of liked that kind of like archetype of like the gold tooth like villain. It's a little camp in some areas in that way, but Maureen was a very severe woman. She didn't give tours herself. She had a hard time with people. But she was very kind to me, actually. She was, I've worked for her for 3 years, and she was very, very kind. So yeah,
oh, that's good. I mean, the rough
yeah,
exterior, but the kind heart. So you're
yeah.
saying that you really like horror. You pretty much just write horror. You got a black cat. I mean, I'm
Well, he's black and white, but I do have a black cat as well.
okay. So we got a tuxedo there. I've got two red point Siamese that usually barge in on me, so I have to leave the door open. Otherwise, you'll
So
hear them out there just whining if I close the door.
yeah, yeah, ours too. Yeah.
So so horror. Why the draw to horror? And even at such an early age, like you're mentioning, to before starting off at like 5 years old and building from there.
Yeah, well, I can't tell you why so young. I grew up with an older aunt. So she had all of the old classics on VHS. My first horror movie was William Castle's 13
Okay.
Ghosts. And for some reason as a child, I watched it so much that I wore out the tape. I loved the intro with all of the ghosts, all of the 13 ghosts like coming towards the screen and like I wasn't as a kid, like I wasn't scared. I just really, and then it was like every Halloween episode of every cartoon was my favorite. Like Scooby-Doo obviously was like it just for some reason I didn't care about any other subject except for like haunted houses and like spooky things. Um and then I think, as I got older and I became more articulate and more sentient, I was kind of able to understand that like fear is a very deeply personal thing. And like learning about social fears and individual fears gives us a lot of room for reflection.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like that's kind of a unique vehicle to the genre. Also, I just like being scared. Being scared is fun. I don't know what got rewired in my brain, but if you want me to be more academic about it, that's that is my I do truly have a very I'm very drawn to the academics of horror, especially for women and feminism and stuff. So
So it sounds like you're more about the social aspects and the impacts there of the
yeah,
psychological horror.
yeah. I'm also really interested in horror that looks at family dynamics. So even like, Haunting of Hill House, Mike Flanagan's interpretation. I feel like horror that also is imbued with sadness and like relational commentary about what it means to be human and to suffer is
Mhm.
really, really impactful to me. So yeah, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me because I mean, in fact, last night where I was at a seminar where we were learning what is some of the aspects of horror, because I write horror. That was where I was first published, um,
Okay.
and some other things. And as working with film, because I review a lot of horror across the
Wow.
board on everything. So yeah, so I appreciate that. So we're kind of going. We got the inspiration for this movie, the inspiration for why you are, into horror, but kind of looking back over your life. What you said you're a writer and director.
Hmm.
So why, what drew you into wanting to make movies?
Well, I was a photographer for 5 years, starting in 2018. So the visual medium was always kind of there. But then I had this opportunity to move to Los Angeles in 2021 after my photography studio closed. And like, it was the pandemic, obviously. And I've always been a big movie fan. I was the only one in my family that really was. I watched a lot of movies alone. It was kind of the way for me to feel seen and to feel connected to the world was through film. And so when I moved here, I had a friend that was production designing, Ariel Vida. She's actually pretty well known to the festival circuit. She's amazing. But she offered to have me come on set to help her with just some second unit art department stuff, just to see how I felt. And from there, I got very, very lucky and kept getting called back for art department and then eventually props stuff on feature films and music videos. I got to work on a segment of VHS 85, which was really probably one of the highlights, and then Destroy All Neighbors on Shutter is one I got to work with. So all that to say, I really loved being crew, but it kind of dawned on me. I also had, a history as a writer, and I think it took me a minute to realize that there wasn't a barrier to entry to write. Like I didn't have to be like this super upper echelon person to have the privilege to screenwrite. So I just started consuming books about screenwriting. I finished my degree and took as many screenwriting classes as I possibly could. It took me 12 years to finish college. But I just dove into it. And so the first thing I ever wrote is what we finally shot this summer called Vermin, and Deadlock came after it. But yeah, I just films just really writing in general and films make me feel less lonely. And so it's just a really resonant medium for me.
Okay, so you have a film out there that you direct called Vermin.
Yeah,
You
so it's
asked
in
about that real quick.
yeah, so it's in post. It's almost done. I'm really hoping that by the time I get to Film Quest, it is perfectly done. Obviously we've missed much of this year's circuit, but next year we'll be plugging that in, of course, to Film Quest. And Vermin is another kind of social commentary. It's an 8 minute long film, so pretty short, but um, it's about a man who's recently divorced, who, as soon as his, soon to be ex-wife has left, this really nice apartment they shared is now disheveled. He's using the china to eat takeout off of. Like he's reverted to being a child, which I think a lot of people in heterosexual relationships with men tend to observe. Um, so I really wanted to. I also felt very passionately after a lifetime of watching men project their ideas of women onto into horror. I kind of was like, I don't want to feel obligated to write only women in horror because I'm a woman in horror. I really wanted to like use uh the male character to my, like, I guess revenge purposes. um so it was a really special film. We used a live Black Widow spider. We hired a real spider wrangler who Steve Kutcher, who worked on Arachnophobia and The Goonies and just lots of experience, and it was a really special film. So
I'll admit that kind of makes me jump a little bit because I have been bitten by a black widow and
oh no.
have a scar on my arm from it. So,
Oh my God. I'm glad you're alive. That was
oh yeah.
definitely a concern
No,
for us.
actually, what they were saying, because I was as an adult, I was told that most adults will live through a black widow bite unless there's multiple ones. But well, I don't know if you can really see, there's a little white spot right here on my arm. I had a bruise about that big. And for about 9 months, my joints and everything just ached.
Ah,
So,
sorry, that's awful. That was I mean, we also had a medic on set for that reason, but it's really
mhm.
funny because once we wrapped out Steve, the spider wrangler, we wrapped him out, he took his spiders, and then we were on the back patio of the location and we looked in some potted plants and there were Black Widow spiders hanging out in the plant. And I was like, oh. like,
Hey, you
it
want
was
some new recruits?
like, yeah, Steve, wait, do you want some more? He actually went out into the woods to find the Black Widow that ended up on set with us. Like he didn't buy it or anything. That man went out to the woods to get it. Anyways, so yeah.
So that's got some interesting stuff. So, in writing your screenplay, we'll get back to that now. What we talked about the drive and everything. What would you say? You said there's no real, entry cost doing it, but what would you say is starting off with the hardest thing about actually putting together your writing?
Mm. Well, I think screenwriting, it's like you can't be someone who's written in other forms and think that screenwriting is going to be like a natural thing to you. I'm sure you know this. Like I see, and I struggled with it too. And I had really wonderful friends who didn't shield me from critique and, told me early on, like, hey, like, you don't need this kind of like prosy stuff in here. Like it sounds great, but not here. And that would, and you don't realize like how much of a muscle that is that you have to train to write something that is interesting enough that you want to keep reading, but isn't taking up like brain space in that way. So uh I also, I know lots of people will use like sticky notes or like I think it's Final Draft that has you can organize all of your beat notes and act notes on stick, and that's not how I am. I have a very like, I do have a process, but it's very unorganized. Where I usually sit down with any random notebook I have and just start writing questions to myself about like
Mhm.
what I'm stuck on, like what I think I want to get at, but I don't know how to bridge that. That's where I find the most trouble is kind of working out those kinks and then making it a ritual to sit down and do that. But I think if you're really serious, obviously, about developing as a writer, that's kind of like a non-negotiable. But also, and then of course, your own inner critic is a pretty significant doorstop sometimes. But yeah.
Imposter syndrome strikes again.
Yes. Yes. I heard someone on set once, I was talking about imposter syndrome, and someone was like, "What is that?" And I thought they were making a joke, so I laughed. And then they're like, "No, I really don't know what that is." And it was like truly, I was like, "Oh, you that must be a nice life that you have." Like a nice unbothered life.
So on the flip side of that, that was some of the hard stuff to work through, but what is it that draws you to it? Why, what is the draw for screenwriting for you? What makes it so good?
There's the pros and cons, but the pros really, I've noticed that sometimes I have a hard time just saying what I want to say. I think we all kind of experience like being direct. And screenwriting is kind of like a nice workaround to that. When you want to, you have to just show what's happening and trust that your reader, your audience understands the message, which I think a lot of Deadlock, I believe, had that. But um, I just I like painting a picture. I mean, it is a visual. I mean, all writing is visual, right? Of course, you could make an argument that long form prose will give you more of an impression of a picture, but um, because screenwriting is so action driven, you almost feel like I almost feel like I'm in motion when I'm reading a script or writing a script in a way that I don't feel when I'm reading a novel or it feels very stationary and insular, whereas with screenwriting you're getting to interact with characters in a way that I just don't find in more long form kinds of
Okay.
writing. And also just the exercise of writing dialogue I really enjoy too. Again, of like thinking about how I or other people I know talk around what they actually want to say is a really, really fun uh challenge, and also helps me avoid saying what I want to say. So yeah.
Okay. So, kind of getting into it, you were talking about like 13 Ghosts was one of your early inspirations, but as you move forward in life, what were some of your other inspiring films that
Hmm.
kind of drove you forward and going, I really want to be doing this sort of stuff, and maybe what it was about them that you think that really kind of pushed you forward?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people will kind of point to their teenage years as some of that. And of course, I was a teenager in the early 2000s, which was not a great time for horror, if may be so bold. Um, some of the films I loved in that era, I know like objectively aren't good. Like The Messengers with Kristen Stewart, because she's a huge like horror person. I rewatched it recently. It's actually not as bad as like IMDb will have you believe, but I felt very moved by that film in that um it uses misdirection really well. And it was one of the first films I can think of when I watched it. I truly like did not see what was coming. And I thought some of the scares were pretty unique in it, even if maybe some of the other parts of it weren't perfect. But and then kind of later teens, early 20s, It Follows came out. It Follows is like top of my influence list. I have It Follows tattoo on a VHS tape. Um, I really that was a film just in visual like color and its use of like ultra wide angles and uh love how it introduces the scare really slowly. I have you've seen It Follows, I assume.
It's been a while, so you're good.
Yeah, okay. So just like the monster, the entity, will be in a super wide shot and the characters are doing something innocuous and they don't notice this thing entering frame for a really long time, and watching that film being like, this is such a brilliant departure from the jump scares of the 2000s or the, mid 2000s, late 2000s. Um so that really influenced me well before I started writing and like really thinking about film. And I took actually a lot of that and put it in Vermin, that idea. Um, I would definitely say the first VHS, um, Grave Encounters, all of those films, while maybe not perfect, were my introduction to the indie filmmaking world. The world of watching indie filmmakers be imperfect and make some kind of like messy stuff, but stuff that I hadn't seen in theaters. Um, yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna let you know right now, the audio is coming through fine, but for some reason your picture froze. So
Oh, okay.
it's not a big problem. Like I said, the audio is still coming through, so we can continue talking. Uh,
Okay.
I just figured I'd let you know if you see this and like, what happened?
Got it. Didn't even realize. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if I'm frozen to you, so I don't know if it's part of the
No.
feedback and forth, but yeah.
No.
So anyway, so we got those are some of your inspirations that kind of push you for in this. So we'll kind of let's kind of jump back to on you for a bit. It seems like you're really into horror in a bunch of different ways because seeing
Yeah.
the tattoos and everything there. Now, besides that, what does Kristen do to kind of just break away from the film industry and have some fun?
That's a great question because it can be quite all consuming, as you know. I'm a really big outdoors person. I mean, I'm not like, I can't, you know, do like crazy trips, but I'm like really big into kayaking and hiking and things, and like actually as people who tend to spend a lot of time in dark rooms, it's very nice to actually go outside and like interact with people. Um uh I'm still an avid reader of like novels and things. I know that's like kind of still in the same world, but that's like pretty big for me. I'm a big traveler. Nowhere exotic in particular, but just I really crave and value having new experiences and not being in a routine as much. I'm not very domestic. But yeah, those are pretty much, and then film kind of takes up like the rest of the 70% of my life. I used to be a concert photographer. I still go see shows. Like I love a good local band, local show. But I've become more of a recluse since screenwriting. But I try to get out there. Yeah.
Okay. So we got talking about who you are, where you've come from, and we're looking forward a little bit now. You've got Vermin that's getting in the final stages of being wrapped up, so that's probably going out on the circuit next year. But
Yes.
for Deadlock, do you have any?
Mhm.
Oh, welcome back on your video.
Oh, I just came back now. Oh my God. Okay. Oops.
No, it's okay. It's like it's probably something out there on the net that just because, like I said, the audio is coming through with no problem. Um,
Good.
so with Deadlock, do you have any plans of turning that into a film?
Yeah. I'm still kind of, I've been given feedback that folks would really like to see it as a feature. And I'm definitely open to expanding it. It was just going to take some thought. Um, but what I've been inclined to do is to take what Deadlock is right now and shoot a proof of concept with it. I would really like to see it as a real life thing. I certainly It'll take a while because Vermin was self-funded and then also crowdfunded. So my resources have we need to switch up the plan for Deadlock because I cannot subject myself to that again. But yeah, I definitely would like it to exist in some form. I don't want to get trapped in the shorts cycle. So yeah, it'd be cool to see it kind of expand out into the universe a bit more.
Okay. And since you're kind of time they're doing that with Deadlock, what about Vermin? Is that a short that's going to just wrap up on its own, or is you got other plans possibly for that?
No, yeah, I think Vermin, I'm happy with Vermin existing how it is. I don't think it's a story that it's really more like a vignette, which was honestly the when I was approached by a friend of mine, she really wanted to do like horror vignettes over the summer, and Vermin was kind of written just to be like a even shorter film, but I'm insane and I needed to make it a whole production. Um, but no, I'm happy with how the story ends because it's just honestly like a universal experience for like a lot of people, and to be long-winded about it would almost be like to lecture, I think. So I'm really happy with the
Okay.
length that it's at. Yeah.
Any other projects that we can look forward to?
I'm back at my writing desk now, so I'm finishing writing a feature that's actually not horror, which is kind of strange for me. But it's more of a drama. I like to say that drama is just horror without the jump scares. But so finishing that, I do have a couple other horror shorts that I've written. Who knows what's going to happen with it? And yeah, I'm just kind of working some freelance writing jobs, here and there to keep it going. So
I
um
understand that
I
one.
yeah, working on some friends' shorts too. And just kind of keeping that community alive and
Yep.
being inspired.
Okay, so you got those projects you're working on. If you had the opportunity to work on a dream project, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a really great question. Okay, so I recently have been very inspired by Damien McCarthy's work, who did Oddity that came out this summer. He also did Caveat before that. And I don't think I've ever seen a film like that I felt like ticked all my boxes in my particular subgenre of horror that I love. And when I watched Oddity, I was like, this is the kind of movie I want to make. So I don't know if it's so much of a dream project, but getting to even just pick his brain and like maybe even work in some capacity, even in art department again, on a Damien McCarthy production would be like a dream come true to me. Um, but yeah, I would love that.
Okay, so we're coming up on about that 30-minute mark. So I'm
Mhm,
gonna, I have another question for you, but I wanted to give you some thoughts to think on because I'm gonna give you a chance to do a final call out, however you want to do it, whoever you want to thank, anything you want to pitch, anything you want to tell people. But
mhm,
before that, I want to ask, just it's one of those fun little questions I ask people and kind of keep people going because there's a lot of aspiring people out there. And so it's if you had someone come up to you and say, "Hey, I want to become a filmmaker,"
mhm.
what advice would you give them?
My number one advice is always to be curious about other people. I know a lot of folks want advice on networking, which is a very important part of this life, but also forming genuine connections with other people doesn't happen if you're only looking to advance yourself. And so looking for genuine opportunities to collaborate with people that you feel are like-minded, that you really do admire, who, and I mean like people that are at your same level. There are certain barriers to entry, but only to an extent. I wouldn't be here without the friends that we've oscillated between each other's films, and you know but also eat dinner together and like spend time together and genuinely love each other. So I would say look for those communities that you want to be a part of, offer what you can offer to other people, and show up for that, and people will see that and respect you for it, and you know continue to want to work with you. But it really has to be like a genuine thing. And as far as like writing goes, that's just my big thing is inspiration is a myth, and you're supposed to be uncomfortable when you're writing like 85% of the time. Like that flow state isn't real until like you're really deep in it. So not waiting for when you're feeling like it to write. Just like even if you're writing nonsense, or like for me again, like I just write questions until I decide that I'm in the world enough to feel like I'm ready to go. But it really is about writing is really about ritual and discipline and being uncomfortable.
I know one author who says the way to be a writer is you put your butt in a chair and your fingers on the keyboard.
Essentially, yes, that is the long and short of it. Yeah.
So if people want to connect with you, like you're saying, and maybe follow some of the things you're doing and what's coming up and follow up on Vermin, where can they find you on social media or
Yeah.
anywhere out
So
there on the net? It's
yeah, I really only use Instagram as like my main, and it's just my handle is just my first and last name, so pretty easy. um I do use Facebook, but I'm kind of a more of a lurker on that. And I've never used Twitter. I have an account that I have never touched or posted anything from. So unfortunately, there's that. But you can also find like my filmography on IMDb if you're curious about that. My website again is just my first and last name.com. But yeah, Instagram is kind of where I hang out as a like a social media user. So
Okay.
and yeah, and then Vermin hopefully will be hitting the festival circuit soon. So
All right. Sounds great. So any final words you'd like to throw out, or thank yous, or anything you'd like to say?
yeah, well, as far as so pertaining to Deadlock, I really have to thank my friend Mick Munyai, who Deadlock was written. We got together and I was like, I want to write, but I need like someone to hold me accountable. And so he was writing his own scripts based on some ideas that he had. I was writing my own, and then we would call each other for like 2 hours at a time. And so Deadlock went through pretty good few revisions thanks to him, and it got into the place that it was, and now it's a top 30 finalist at FilmQuest. So I owe a lot to him for that. And then in general, just all of my filmmaker friends that helped on Vermin, Cassie Labo, Malachi Moore, my producers, um, just all of them. I'm very very grateful for, and wouldn't be here without them.
All right. Well, thank you
Yeah,
for joining me here talking about your work and about
thank
yourself.
you. Yeah.
Everybody else out there, if you like what we're doing here, please like this, share this. Let's help out the independent people, get the word out of what they're doing, because there's some really great work coming out throughout the independents and at the film festivals. Come and join us there. If you want to subscribe, great, do that also. Uh, Again, thank you. And are you going to be at FilmQuest?
I'm gonna be there all 10 days. So
We'll have to get together and do some meals or something, because I'm there for the duration.
cool, cool. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I don't know anyone else is going the whole time. So
Yeah,
it's
the
just
only
like,
other person I think usually there's another screenwriter who's down from the LA area. They usually come up. You might know him, Mike Luke.
no, I don't. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I know
cool.
he's usually there the entire time also. So yeah,
Yeah.
we'll
Yay.
get you some introductions.
Yes. Thank you. I love that.
Okay. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.